Celeste is a game that has come to mean a lot to me in recent times. Back in 2018 when it came out, it definitely struck a nerve with me because it was a pretty uncertain time in my life. I'd just left school the prior year and was only just taking my first steps on the great journey to adulthood. That year was great for me actually. Despite the middling amounts of hypochondria I was newly experiencing, everything was fine. The first year of college for me was and probably will always be the best year I'd spent there. I was making friends, turning in assignments just fine, generally succeeding and progressing in life. So I didn't so much relate to Madeline's character as much as I sympathized with her. There was a little bit of a disconnect reining me in from writing about this game and what it meant to me because, well, it didn't mean much to me outside of being an excellent platformer with a really nice story. Beginning to write the script for a video like this is always hard, especially when your reasoning is utterly paradoxical. 2 years doesn't seem like a long time, but it is. It is a very long time. It doesn't help that 2020 itself has long overstayed its welcome. At the beginning of this year, when this whole global pandemic started, I was on a repeat of 2 of my subjects in college. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time, and I was optimistic enough that I thought, this time for sure. This time I would pass and move on with my life. I was wrong. Writing a script for a video like this is hard. You always get caught up in the minutiae of so many different ideas and it all starts to feel endlessly questionable. Why do I want to write this piece? How should I start it? How personal do I want to make this? Do people really need to know all this about me? What if my perspective isn't valued? This is a microcosm of the sorts of questions I ask myself every day. I'm so reluctantly addicted to wrapping myself up in my hopes and dreams, making myself warm with optimism that I sometimes slip and fall on my own giddiness and lose total track of my present self. I lose focus. Writing video essays is hard when you've barely done it before. Last time I uploaded one on this hellscape of a website, there was a larger time gap between now and when I played Celeste for the first time, and when I look back on it, I appreciate the cadence in some of my writing, but I feel like nothing greater came to fruition. The editing was bad and padded the video out with pointless cutscenes, and I kind of cringe at myself when I swear on the internet with enthusiasm. But that's okay, right? This is a hobby after all, and I realize that there's no real lasting consequences for being cringeworthy on the internet. Most of the time. But I still look back at that video and say, I should have been better. I should have known about these mistakes. How could I be so stupid? You may be wondering why this is a video about Celeste and not just about, well, life. Because I seem to like talking about myself a lot. No. Just turns out this silly video game is also a microcosm of self-doubt, anxiety, and the preceding depression. It's a game about mental health, which makes it all too obvious why it hauntingly resonated with so many when it was released in the grand year of 2018, which I know was a bad year for many. It does scare me though that our modern lives have become so fractured by our own expectations, granted they're informed by the current world around us, that this game, an independently developed game about learning to live with a broken, horrible part of yourself, was nominated for Game of the Year. The devs of Celeste made sure they had all their bases covered. Every character in the game is dealing with their own inner turmoil, except maybe Granny, she's just a bitch. Madeline, our protagonist, is searching for an escape, something she needs to do to gain a better perspective on all her late nights she spent drunk and the mishappenings of a boring, everyday life. She wants to climb Celeste Mountain, for some reason. Why a mountain? I've always asked myself, as if 99% of the game's story isn't about some abstracted idea of how the human mind wages war on itself. The mountain is a challenge. It's what Madeline uses to wake herself up from stagnation. It's the first step to a greater journey. Madeline begins her journey with optimism. Despite Granny being a bitch, you can do this. Madeline meets Theo quite early into the game. Unlike Madeline, who's a very determinist kind of character, Theo is someone who kind of seems lost. He's much chippier than she is, and perhaps doesn't suffer the same level of self-destructiveness, but I always thought Theo was the kind of character who was searching for a life rather than trying to revitalize the one he has. He seems happy, but maybe he's using his larger-than-life temperament to cover up how desperate he is for some actual connection, maybe? Theo, obviously, is a much harder character to put in a box than Madeline. Of course, I mean, Madeline has all her cards on the table for the player. We see every peak and trough of her emotional well-being throughout the entire game. And I think it's beautiful that the only time we get a better look into Theo is when they're put through such a turbulent experience together that they can just both reflect on it. And just talk about stuff. This is one of my favorite parts of the game because all too often, all you need is one conversation to put things into perspective. You don't necessarily need to climb a literal or figurative mountain. The issue is, sometimes you go forward with a new perspective and think the problem's solved. It's usually not. And our realization of this can sometimes be pretty ugly. Let's talk about Madeline. I wish her name was Madeline, but no, she's just a manifestation of the part of you that tells you that you're not capable of climbing mountains, achieving your goals, and writing good video essays. We all have a Madeline, I think. Some people are just better at living with that part of themselves than others and don't always need a helping hand, but she's still there. The greatest achievement Celeste puts forward for players who aren't totally confident with 2D platformers is that it kind of fucks with you. This is a hard game, and sometimes you'll even say to yourself that you don't have the coordination, the reaction times, or just the bother to finish the damn game. I promise you, fighting that voice in your head is worth it, because every time you die and restart the beginning of a tough screen, pondering, why am I so bad at this game? You are also armed with your past mistakes. You start to build momentum, making less mistakes. You inch closer and closer to the end of the screen until you've done it. The thing is about Celeste is that there's always another challenge around the corner. That part of you bubbles to the surface of your mind. You can't keep going like this. Something bad will happen. You're gonna fail this one too. Again and again. You explode. You spiral like a feather in a hurricane. You're compromised. Truly vulnerable. You feel like you're in the presence of danger, but not physically. You're afraid of the abuse and self-deprecation you throw at yourself. All future bets are off. Who even cares about the future anyway? You cower and find yourself in a slump. I can't say I've ever experienced panic attacks like Madeline does halfway into the game. I have had a few, brought on through the hypochondria I so eloquently dismissed when I started this video. I've had moments where the only thoughts I had were contested of, why are you so bad at everything you do? My Madeline is quite bad. He constantly wishes I wasn't sitting here recording this script and was instead out there in the world that's falling apart, doing something that's meaningful. He wonders why I barely ever finish writing music. He wonders if I even deserve companionship when I'm too lazy of a human being to even reconcile and enjoy my own. How do we accept all of this? How do we keep going? Life is never constant. We go from self-fulfillment to self-deprecation quite easily, sometimes in the blink of an eye. We will always fight with ourselves sometimes, at least. Our minds are strange creatures after all, stranger than the known universe. Do our struggles really matter? Does anyone care? Why are we here? Why is there this stigma of striving for excellence if no one will mourn my achievements when I'm gone? Everything ends anyway. After Madeline and Theo's conversation about how hopelessly entangled they are with themselves, Madeline confronts herself. In an attempt to cut herself off from her problems, she pushes part of herself away. I don't need you anymore. This backfires badly. Madeline thinks she's making progress, but she's losing it. The further she runs away from her problems, the worse they grow and grow and grow until they attack her and she's physically forced to acknowledge them. As someone who's tried to do this a few times before, this shatters me. Because you're giving up even an inkling of yourself just to feel safe in your own head for a little while. A moment. Funny story, but this is what happens when I uninstall Smash Bros for the third time because I convinced myself that I'll never reach my dreams of becoming a high-level competitive player. I'm bargaining. I'm trimming the thorns, but there's still a spore there. And potential for a stunning red rose. We needn't be shoving our doubts and anxieties deep down the throats of our minds. Sometimes talking with other people helps, but you know what also really helps? Talking with ourselves. Checking up with ourselves, hell, even coddling ourselves every once in a while, just to make sure we're on the right track. Yes, talking with others and getting therapy helps inform internal reflection, but we also need to have the willpower to change and to make amends. I absolutely adore this part of Celeste. It made me cry in 2018 and I didn't even have all the stuff I have going on now. What really gets me is that Madeline's broken part of herself is really scared of her. The prospect of Madeline somehow expelling her from her life makes her utterly devastated. I still remember the sobbing inflection in Madeline's quirky voice sound effects to this very day, also while Lena Raine's music plays sullenly in the background. Madeline has changed her mind though. She can't expel a part of herself. She would lose too much. Instead, she reaches out and convinces herself that she needs to be whole to climb this mountain, and that together, in imperfect harmony, they can do this. I failed again. I failed the studies I was already repeating. Twice I failed them. My studies which involve engaging with and producing sound, my passion. And I ran away too. But that's okay. If I didn't, would this script even have been written? Perhaps, but not in the same vein as this at all. This video is an expression of my beliefs and how an incredible piece of art has helped me cope with my own challenges. It exists to perhaps help someone else who struggles with self-actualization from time to time. Someone like me who maybe thinks that they need to make an impact to have a well-lived life. Whoever that person is watching this, you don't. You don't need to climb mountains as long as you enjoy the view that you already have. But at the same time, I get that we search for fulfillment in great challenges. That's living though. Like, it isn't about being remembered or just being truly good at what you do. It's about all the little things. It's about being satisfied that you learned how to play a new piece on your instrument. It's about gathering with family and friends for a special occasion, or, you know, just enjoying each other's company. It's about getting better at a silly fighting game that eventually harbors discussion and connections with other people. It's about venturing into the unknown night and developing new passions for people, places, and things you never even thought to exist. It's about writing a video on Celeste and how it helped you do all of these things. Celeste can be a short and sweet 5 to 8 hour experience, depending on how good you are and if you want the optional extra challenges. You can accept the roll credits and the gentle stroll down the mountain as a job well done, and move on to something else. Or you can keep going up and above to the literal stars. The choice That's yours to make.